September 29th edition of the Paperboyz. I'm Courier Sports Editor Doug Newhoff. I'm joined this morning by Assistant Sports Editor Jim Sullivan at my left and Sports Writer Nick Pateros to my right. We've got a lot of things to cover this week. It's a busy time of year with college football in full swing, high school football season about at the midway point, volleyball season's going strong, the Blackhawks have gotten started, so we've got no shortage of things to talk about locally without even getting into the national scene with the baseball playoff races and NFL season underway. So let's start by looking back a little bit and forward a little bit with our college football teams. UNI and Iowa State had open dates on their schedule last week, but Iowa had a matchup with North Texas and former Iowa State coach Dan McCarney. I think that came out pretty much as expected, with the Hawkeyes posting a pretty convincing win. You guys have any takeaways from what you saw or heard about that game last week?
By and large, just that Iowa did what Iowa has been doing for the balance of this season so far. They've been taking care of business rather well. It was not a perfect effort by any means. They had a fumble or two in there, some penalties here and there, but it's a little hard to quarrel with 62-16, no matter who the opponent is. And once again, C.J. Beathard was impressive, maybe even more so than he was against Iowa. Ken Zeri had a fumble but ran well. Their defense produced a couple of touchdowns. It's all looking right now very, very good for Iowa. Having said that, the challenges do grow a little bit, beginning with this week at Wisconsin. But given what Iowa has done so far, given the way some of their players are playing, and given the schedule and the absence of some people on it, Ohio State didn't even won. Maybe it's hard for Iowa fans to adopt this stance, but I think they have every reason to be optimistic about the rest of this year.
You have to definitely be optimistic about the quarterback position after what Beathard did. I mean, that's almost a perfect day passing, really unheard of, against any team at that level to put up the numbers he did against North Texas. So I think they can draw a lot of positives out of that performance. And then Desmond King on their defense has really done a tremendous job. 3 interceptions so far. He's returning some kicks for him as well. It looks like a playmaker on special teams. A lot to be excited about, and now we'll see kind of how good they are after this trip to Wisconsin.
Yeah, from what I see so far, it's kind of the staples of what has been good for Iowa football in the past are starting to show through again. They're tough against the run. They're able to move the ball with the running game a little bit, and they're not hurting themselves a lot. And those elements have been good for Iowa in the past and have led them to some pretty successful seasons. So I'm right on the same page with you guys. I think things are looking pretty good. Wisconsin will be an interesting game. I did a little bit of statistical research on the Badgers, and it's kind of hard to get a good take on them. I mean, they're 3-1, lost their opener to Alabama at a neutral site, which I suspect will happen to a lot of teams anywhere in the country. Then they reeled off 3 wins against Miami of Ohio, Troy, and Hawaii last week. They only have given up 1 field goal in those 3 games total. And last week they had a pretty good rushing game, which has been one of the fundamentals of Wisconsin football for a number of years. So what do you guys think about this matchup?
Intrigue, and I think you make some excellent points there, especially about the Badgers' schedule. And this is the gospel according to Bill Snyder when it comes to scheduling. You want to build a record. You don't schedule power, or too many power teams at least. Certainly Alabama is as good as it gets, and Wisconsin lost that game. It's a little hard to draw a lot of lessons from the next 3, although the defense certainly looked good, and you can't argue with 3 points given up over three games. But my sense is, and I could be colossally wrong about this, that Wisconsin is starting a sort of a long, slow period of decline here. They're not where they were a few years ago. I don't think they're where they were certainly when Barry Alvarez was in its heyday. And it's not that they're a bad program. They're certainly not as dreadful as they were in the 60s and 70s. They're a solid program, but not quite at that powerhouse level. And I think they're vulnerable. I think Iowa can go in there and win. I don't know that they will, but I think Iowa certainly has a chance to come out of Camp Randall with a W.
Camp Randall's a tough place to play, and that they are 3-0 at home so far this season. One stat that kind of jumped out at me was the numbers that their quarterback, Joel Stave, is that how you pronounce it? Has put up a 66% completion percentage so far, and 830 yards and 7 touchdowns for a team that likes to run the ball. So he's been a pretty efficient passer so far this season too.
Yeah, I think a lot of be kind of one of those games. Wisconsin's line against Iowa's defensive line. I think that'll be a pretty good matchup to watch there. See if Iowa can stop the run. I think Iowa's pass defense has been really strong, as I alluded to earlier this year.
All right, let's move on to Ames, where Iowa State will host Kansas Saturday in what I think is a pretty important game for the Cyclones. They need to get on a roll. They need to start playing up to their potential. I think they've let a few things slip through their hands early this season. I think they're a little better team than what we've seen based on their record. Sully, you will be there in person Saturday. What's your take on this game?
I think it's as close to a must-win game as there is. Paul Rhodes would disagree with that. He said, well, it's a must-win because it's the next game on their schedule. Okay, fine. But I think you're exactly right. They need to start getting some things together. They need to play a full game. That hasn't quite happened yet, at least certainly not the last two outings. They're right there with Iowa in the fourth quarter and let the Hawkeyes dominate them. Maybe that's not quite the right way to put it, but certainly Iowa took charge. They had chances to beat Toledo. Had a fairly short field goal to win it in regulation, didn't get it done. And then Richardson took a sack at the end of double overtime to seal their fate there. I do agree with Paul Rhodes on this much. They are, I think, a better football team than they were a year ago. I agree with them to the extent I think they're in a better frame of mind than they were a year ago when they went down to Lawrence and lost by 34-14. Now all they have to do is go out in the field and play. And I think they're more capable of doing that this year, of putting things aside, going out and playing their game. Another encouraging note for them, I think, is the emergence of Mike Warren as a featured back. He did very well at Toledo. I think he can do well against Kansas. I think the defense matches up well with Kansas. It's a pass-oriented offense, but they've struggled a little bit this year. They have some issues at quarterback. So this is a game Iowa State certainly can win. Now all they have to do is go out and win it.
I think Kansas has played a fairly tough schedule so far by comparison to some of the other FBS teams early in the season, but they lost their opener to South Dakota State 41-38. We all know South Dakota State's a pretty representative team from the football championship subdivision with Northern Iowa and North Dakota State, and those teams, they're ranked in the top 5, I believe, nationally, so that's not a terrible loss to lose your opener to a team like that. And then they lost to a Memphis team that I didn't know much about, so it was kind of interesting to see just what they're all about. But Memphis is 4-0, and they're averaging 54 points a game and 570 yards, so that's no slouch either. And then they lost to Rutgers, Big Ten team that's traditionally pretty tough to beat at home. So they lost to them out there. Interesting things about Kansas, they're averaging 426 yards per game. Unfortunately for them, they're giving up 542, so that's usually not going to be a very good mix. They've been pretty effective in the red zone. They score 77% of the time, 54% of those are TDs, and they're converting 43% of their third downs. So they're doing some good things offensively, maybe not as well as they'd like defensively. I think this is a game that Iowa State has to score, has to move the ball consistently and get a lead, because I think they're going to give up some points.
I would agree with that. A couple other things are, if you look at the Big 12 statistics, Kansas and Iowa State are fairly comparable. I mean, there's no glaring differences there. They're both right about the same spot in all the statistical categories. The Rutgers game is interesting. I think it's more of a bad loss than the numbers might suggest, just because Rutgers is in such disarray. The programs, their coach has been suspended. They've lost some players, and it's not. There's a lot of discussion among Big Ten skeptics about whether this was really a good idea to let them in the league at all, and to lose to that program, it's not horrible, but still, it's not where you want to be at this time of year. And I guess the thing that maybe we're forgetting here, that I'm forgetting here, is that Kansas certainly has a lot to play for here too. I mean, they look at this and say, aha, here's Iowa State, a team we've beaten before last year. Maybe we need a win. Can we go into Ames and do it? And they have every reason to believe, I would think, that they can do just that.
So one of those deals, when you look at those two schools, the loser starts to think about basketball season right away.
Pretty much, if they're not already.
It all adds up to a pretty good matchup for a game that won't mean a lot to a lot of people around the country, but for Iowa State and Kansas fans, I mean, this should be a good one.
I would think so.
Our third game this week has you and I making a little trip to Illinois State for a noon kickoff. Never an easy place to play, and these teams have gone back and forth over the years. Last year, UNI beat an unbeaten Illinois State team in the Unidome late in the season, and then lost to the Redbirds over there in Normal in the second round of the FCS playoff. You were there for both of those games, Sully. A lot of those players are back for Illinois State. I'm not sure if they're playing quite as well as they thought they would be at this point, but they're still a pretty tough opponent.
You went exactly where I was going to go. You look at their, they weren't, weren't impressive at all against Iowa. They beat a Morgan State team that's undistinguished. That's like the 65th in the set of power rankings I saw, and then beat Eastern Illinois in a close game. They're not quite at the level they were a year ago. I think that's very true. You look at Trey Roberson's stats; he's about a 50% passer. Kopritz is having a really good year. He carried 33 times, I think, in the Eastern game. Had, I think, around $150 yardage wise. The other interesting thing is that Teddy Corman, one of their best defensive players, was out. He has a foot injury. Now, I don't know if he's coming back for UNI or not, but that would be a fairly significant loss if he's not. The other thing I think that we have to look at with this game, from if you go back to a year ago, is that when UNI beat Illinois State in the Dome, they were able to put a lot of pressure on Trey Roberson. I think they sacked him a number of times. They were able to force him to make some throws he didn't want to make. In the rematch down there, it all changed. I'm not sure they ever sacked Roberson, certainly not in the first half. He found some things over the middle, got rid of the ball quickly, and before you knew it, the Redbirds had 21 points on the board. These games have been traditionally close over the years. UNI has dropped 3 of the last 4 over normal. But with where Illinois State is, if UNI shows up and plays well, they're going to have a chance.
You feel this will be one of the tougher defenses UNI's seen since the Iowa State game? It doesn't seem like, the last 2 opponents were kind of offensive-centric teams. What challenge will Illinois State provide with their defense?
I think it's just a fundamentally sound physical defense. That's the way it's been in the past. And our experience, they do have some guys back. Like I said, Corwin's not there or hasn't been there. They have a Pat Meehan's back. He's a very good defensive player. So they can match up reasonably well with UNI from a physical standpoint. So there's that part of it. I think you're exactly right. This is more of a balanced team than what UNI has seen since the Iowa State game, and that presents some challenges as well.
It's one thing about Illinois State, too, they've taken advantage of their opportunities. They're scoring on 90% of their red zone possessions, and 80% of those are touchdowns. So usually when they get inside that 20, they're getting the job done by putting up 6 points rather than settling for 3. I think it's the keys for UNI. First of all, they have to figure out a way to keep Kopritz under control. He's averaging 5 point something yards per carry. That needs to be more like 2 point something against UNI in this game for the Panthers to keep him where they need to keep him. And they've got to keep Roberson in the pocket and force him to throw the ball as much as possible. I mean, you don't want him running loose in the open field. He makes too many things happen and gets too many big yards and big plays that could put UNI's defense in some bad situations. So let's keep him in the pocket, try and make him throw the ball. He does have a pretty good weapon there that has emerged in Anthony Warham, and he's averaging 21.5 yards per catch, and he's already got 4 TDs with just 13 receptions on the year. So you have to figure out a way to keep him under control too. But this is going to be another good game. I think the Panthers can go in there and win. It's a pretty even matchup on paper, the way it looks to me. The one thing you wonder is last year when Illinois State had an extra week between the 2 rounds of the playoffs, while UNI played in the first round, they made pretty good use of it. They made some adjustments, and Coach Farley mentioned Monday at the press luncheon that they had a few wrinkles that UNI wasn't quite ready for, I guess, at the outset or whatever, and put it on UNI pretty good in that playoff game. This time both teams have an open week, so there's that element of mystery that UNI may have a few wrinkles for the Redbirds too, so this could be a little bit of a chess match.
I agree. I think one thing too that's in UNI's favor going in this one is Aaron Bailey. I think Aaron Bailey offers more of a challenge to that defense than Breon Carnes did a year ago, especially in the rematch. If you will, Carnes was not quite big enough for the moment in that playoff game. He really struggled early, and that, I think, enabled Illinois State to really shut down David Johnson. I'm sure that Illinois State has seen the zone read plenty on film. I think they'll be geared to stop that, but if Bailey can complete a couple passes to Darius Fountain If you and I can get some people involved like Tyvis Smith or Darian Miller in the passing game, they can neutralize that. So I think that quarterback play is going to be very, very important for you and I, especially early in the game.
I like Bailey's growth in the passing game too. I mean, he's proven through the first 3 games that he's not just a one-dimensional scramble, run, read option quarterback. I mean, he can throw the ball down the field with pretty good accuracy, and has shown that he's not reluctant to do that either. I mean, he doesn't just tuck it down and take off at the first sign of trouble. I mean, he's making some things happen, and I like the way UNI has progressed through their first 3 games. I think a lot of things are going in the right direction. Coach Farley also mentioned Monday that he felt like his team was in a good place, but you know, if you don't get something out of these next 2 weeks, all of a sudden you're in a bad place. So this tightrope that they're walking through these first 5 games, so far they're hanging on by their toenails and keeping themselves in a good position. But this is a big game. If they can win this one, it really sets them up for a good game at North Dakota State that, you know, could possibly be for the Missouri Valley Football Championship.
That's true. I was going to add one cautionary note about the back half of the schedule, and we'll get to that, you know, at the appropriate time. But Southern Illinois has posted a big victory over Liberty. You know, we just talked about South Dakota State a little while ago beating Kansas. I think Western Illinois will probably be improved. And don't forget that South Dakota came in a couple of years ago and beat UNI. So the challenges will not stop with the trip to the Fargo Dome. That UNI will have some business to take care of afterwards. But first things first, it's Illinois State and then North Dakota State after that.
It is. The entire Valley is pretty tough this year.
It is. It really is.
Most of their teams are in the top 25, and Western Illinois is not, but they've got a couple of big wins and seem to be playing pretty well too. So you're right. These games look on paper like the biggest ones on the schedule, but there are plenty of bigger ones to come. And UNI doesn't play Youngstown State, but on the other hand, Illinois State doesn't have to play North Dakota State. So it's going to be an interesting league season, and I really don't see anybody getting through there undefeated, and maybe not even with 1 loss. I mean, who knows? But
That's right.
Should be fun. Let's another college football game of note this week. We've got Central visiting Wartburg for a 1:30 p.m. kickoff Saturday. Wartburg's ranked, I believe, 6th in the country in Division III, and Central is among the teams receiving votes. So it's kind of an early season showdown in that Iowa Conference. The game is going to be televised by KCRG 9.2. Which would be a big thing for both of those teams to get some exposure for some of their alumni and other fans to be able to see them. But anybody looked at much at that game, and what do you think?
I haven't seen a lot on this year's Wartburg team, obviously, and I had a chance to cover them in their final game last season, where they really had Whitewater on the brink there, and looked like that team was maybe as close to a national title contender as Wartburg's ever had a year ago, and you've got Logan Schrader, the quarterback, back, and a lot of nice pieces from that group. So I think this is a Wartburg team that really wants to try to get to that what they were able to do a year ago and create their own identity as well. And it'll start with a big conference game here this weekend.
Yeah, I kind of thought they maybe arrived a year early last year. I didn't know if they'd be quite good enough to get as far as they did, but a lot of those kids are back this year and they're playing really well. This will be a good test for them. So. Good way to get the Iowa Conference season started, and should be a fun game for Wartburg fans as well. We've got some interesting high school football matchups on tap this week too. 10th ranked Cedar Falls takes a trip to Cedar Rapids Jefferson. Locally here we've got the Waterloo East versus Waterloo West game, which is always good for our local fans and those teams. Waterloo Columbus has a tough challenge traveling to Waukon, which is ranked 9th and off to a 4-1 start. Waverly Shell Rock visits Clear Lake. That's always a good matchup between those two schools with a lot of tradition, a lot of history. One of our area games that is always a great game is Appleton Parkersburg at Union. I think you'll be down there to see that. And then one that I'm going to be keeping an eye on just out of curiosity is Don Bosco at HLV of Victor. The Dons are number 4 in 8-player football, and HLV is number 7. It's a battle of unbeatens. So I'll be curious to see how that one comes out. Nick, tell us a little bit more about AP at Union. That's another intriguing game to me.
Yeah, AP's kind of a team that got off to maybe a little bit of a slow start, but it's hard to, Dyke New Hartford looks like they're going to be a real power this year, and that was AP's opener, and they really couldn't move the ball that well against that Dyke New Hartford defense. And then they found themselves down at halftime against Columbus, and then I think that since halftime of that Columbus game, AP's really found itself. They've got that offense moving. A kid that will be in our preps to watch column this week, Devonis Reed, a lineman who's getting some Division I interest, has been one of those guys that has helped kind of clear the way for that offense. And it's just the typical AP rushing attack defense. They're going to make you earn yards. But it seems like they've really found their identity here the past few weeks and are playing some good football. Union's had some tough losses early, but they're coming off a win now. I think they're 3-2. And so they're going to be looking, to kind of establish themselves in a game that should decide a lot on where these teams will be able to finish in their district.
Sully, any thoughts about the East-West matchup? I mean, East has been competitive in some games, not necessarily through 4 quarters all the time. West has shown some flashes of being a really good football team too, so this should be an interesting matchup.
It really should. East really struggled offensively last week. Didn't do much at all against Linmar. They were like negative 47 yards rushing, I think, at the half or something like that. So they've shown at times they can move the ball on the ground. I guess it's the same old story. You have to block from up front, give the kids some room, and then maybe they can gain some yards, but it has to be done on a consistent basis. If you're West, individually speaking, Devon Moore is having a fabulous year. He's around 61% completion, which is almost not unheard of in this day and age, but it's awfully good. Trey Bird was a little banged up last week, but he played. He's got, I think, 34 catches already. Tremendous talent, wide receiver. They've had some people. They have James Drain back now. They have Harrison Imee at running back. They've got a lot of offensive weapons. It's just a matter of playing consistently, staying away from the big mistake. I think that hurt them against Cedar Falls a little bit. This could be, maybe, we don't know, the start of a little bit of a playoff run. They need to start winning some games here.
Right.
They need to take advantage of this opportunity. And certainly West will go in as a favorite, and barring a lot of mistakes, barring something unforeseen, which has happened in this rivalry before. Barring that sort of thing, I think West should go in there and win, but let's see what happens on Friday night.
Anybody know where Trey Bird is on the national recruiting radar?
I do not know.
No, I'm not sure. I think he's picking up some interest. I know last week when I was talking to him, it looked like Winona State had offered a D2 school, and he's still kind of looking at his options. But I imagine his stock has to be rising pretty quick with what he's done so far this season.
And what he did last season. I mean, he was an all-state receiver last season.
Third-team All-Stater.
If you're an all-state receiver in the basically the Mississippi Valley Conference, but I guess now it's the 4A district football. But at that level, if you're an all-state receiver, I mean, you're pretty talented. So I've got to think he's got an opportunity to play at a little higher level than D2. But it'll be fun to see where that goes as well. What else you guys want to talk about today? Major League Baseball. Our Twins keep winning. They're doing their part. They're hanging in there, but the Astros just refuse to lose.
Well, I buried them for the 33rd time this year on Friday night after they blew a game to the Tigers, and then what happens is they start winning games again. I fear that it might be a little bit late. As you said, the Astros won last night. The Angels walked off against Oakland last night. Not the only, but one of the big hopes the Twins have is that Houston finishes on the road. They're on the road right now, and they haven't been good on the road, although they won last night. The Angels play Texas at the end of the year, and that's going to be that could be for the West Division title. The Twins have to hope that both of these teams struggle a little bit, but they have some tough business of their own, finishing up in Cleveland against some good pitching, and then with the Royals at home, and we don't know what the Royals are going to bring to the table. They say they're playing for their own agenda. Most of them, I think they still have a chance to get the best record in the American League. We'll see about that. It hasn't been a particularly good month for them. There's no reason why they can't turn it around, but the Twins have a chance. I think that's all you ask at this time of the year. Now all they have to do is go out and execute and hope they maybe catch lightning in a bottle like they did in 2009 when they came from nowhere to get to the playoffs.
You look at their a game and a half back. The Angels are a half game back. 6 games remaining. You think out of those 3, someone's going to have to win probably 5. Unless Houston can win 4 of those next ones and hold them off. But it'll be an interesting finish there.
Well, Sully and I are Twins fans forever, and I think if you told us at the beginning of the year that the Twins would be playing meaningful games at the end of September, we'd have been satisfied with that,
No doubt
regardless
about
of the
that.
outcome. So.
Yeah, no, and if they finish above 500, I think that's no small accomplishment, given what they had, what we thought they had coming into the year and where they started. If they get to, let's say, just pick 84, 78, I think that they can be happy with that even if they don't make the playoffs.
Paul Molitor, a manager of the year.
He'll get some
think?
votes, I would think.
What he's done with that roster.
I don't know if it's been as much Paul Molitor as giving the young kids a chance and letting them settle in. He has done a good job of bringing those kids along and not throwing too much at them too soon. But Miguel Sano and Brian Buxton, hopefully Max Kepler are going to make an impact here in the near future. Eddie Rosario's been very consistent. Torrey Hunter's been good in the clubhouse. I really like the way that those young players have settled in and started to contribute on a regular basis. Aaron Hicks, I think, has made a big turn in his career for the positive. Now we're just we're short pitching. I think they need to upgrade the bullpen. I think they need to upgrade the starting rotation, and I think then they can consider themselves in the same position that maybe Kansas City was a couple of years ago when they started this strong run that they're on. Anything else, guys? What's going on in volleyball?
Volleyball, it seems like, it's just one of those deals where the powerful teams in our area just keep kind of beating up on each other. Last week you had Cedar Falls going to the Dike New Hartford tournament and coming out with the championship. This week it was Dike New Hartford going to the Cedar Falls tournament and coming out with a championship. And those tournaments are kind of crazy because they're playing 2 out of 3 sets, shorter scoring. I think a lot of times they're only going to 21. So a lot can really happen, a lot of fluctuation. So it's hard to draw a lot out of that other than the fact that you have a lot of teams that are really close in talent level and you have a lot of exciting matches going on. So I think it's going to set up to be a really good postseason here. We'll see how these schools do when it's 3 out of 5 and you have to kind of ride out those waves, the ups and downs that can come within a longer match.
UNI volleyball got off to a 2-0 start in Missouri Valley, but it wasn't easy. But I suspect not a whole lot of things are going to be easy for that team. They're so young and still kind of learning their way and finding their way home.
A team that's going to have to find itself. You have 3 true freshmen that are playing. I don't think Bobby's ever had 3 true freshmen on the court at the same time. It's been a while. A lot of times in that program they've had the luxury of being able to redshirt. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. The Missouri Valley isn't maybe as strong as it's been in the past where they've had multiple teams making the NCAA tournament. So it's all going to come down to the conference tournament at the end of the year, and I think UNI will still be in the mix there. They showed this weekend that they can come back. They had to come back and win a 5-setter against Evansville, who they've actually dominated throughout that program. I think now, 45-1 all time against Evansville. So it's impressive what this UNI program has done within the conference, and I still think they'll be in a position to contend for a conference championship this year.
The Waterloo Blackhawks are at home Saturday night. They are off to a 1-1 start. Lost a shootout game in their opener and then posted a victory in their second game. I don't know a lot of the names on that roster, so you're probably a little more in tune with hockey at that level than I am. A lot of those kids are from your old stomping grounds, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of early, but there's so much turnover though that it's hard to get a handle on who these kids are until we've got, 10, 12, 15, 20 games in the season. The good thing, of course, is that Cale Norris is back in the nets, and that puts them, in my mind, light years ahead of where they were 1 year ago when they struggled out of the gate. So that's very much a positive. They did a nice job on the road winning their opener, lost in the shootout, but as P.K. O'Hanley pointed out to Jim Nelson, 3 out of 4 is not bad to start the season. You had 3 points. You're off to a decent start. Obviously there's a long season ahead of them, but you can't argue with 3 points on the gate. Now we'll just have to see if they can build on that.
Yep, should be good. Well, that's going to do it for this week. It's a great time to be a sports fan in the Cedar Valley. A lot of teams to watch, a lot of good sports action to catch. As always, you can, if you're not there in person, you can catch it all from us at www.wcfcourier.com or in our print editions. Until next week.